Jay Hodges, I'm Jay Hodges, friend of Sinn Féin, and I want to welcome you to a conversation that I am wound up like an 8-day clock to actually have. Today we are going to have a conversation with James Connolly Center in Belfast with its manager, the great, the infamous, the legendary Mr. Séanna Walsh. He is a member of the Belfast City Council. He is a former prisoner that was released in September of 1998 as a part of the Belfast Agreement. He actually read the statement by the IRA Council ending its armed campaign, and in doing this became the first member of the IRA since 1972 to represent the organization publicly without wearing a mask. We're going to have a conversation about his incredible, inspiring story at a later date. Today, I'm going to just rein him in and have him focus on a center that is near and dear to my heart, which is the Connolly Center. And so without further ado, I want to introduce him to you. Sir, how are you doing this morning?
Excellent, Jay, and I'm very glad to be speaking to yourself and to be speaking to your audience right across the US of A.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to join us and to have this conversation. I want to get into the Connolly Center, but just on the off chance that people don't know your story and kind of know who you are, can you talk just briefly about how you got involved, about your, how you were raised, and kind of what led you to activism?
Okay, well, I am originally from the short Strand area of East Belfast, and it's a very small area and surrounded by a very large unionist area. And in the 1970-71, the British Army took over a lot of the, what they call the commanding heights of our area. They took over all of the major buildings. They took over our parish hall. They put people out of their homes and turned them into fortresses. They took over some factories and shops and set up their billets. So it was a very scary time for a young nationalist in the short Strand. We felt very much that we were suffering from an army of occupation, and the way that the British Army would treat young nationalists was that they would regard each and every one of us with suspicion, and they would stop you at every opportunity, put you up against the wall, rough you up, and particularly whenever you're a young teenager, you would tend to be a wee bit lippy, which probably didn't help things. And as a result, I decided that for things to change in this country, that I would become involved with the Republican struggle. I ended up going to jail at the age of 16. I was captured on an operation and I was sentenced to Long Kesh. I was released and recaptured a number of times, three separate occasions. And I served 20 years in Long Kesh. But as you say, that's a story for another time, Jay, and I'd be happy enough to come on and talk about all of that, particularly against the background of the recently released report that we have on the ill treatment of Republican prisoners during the protesting years of 1976 to 1981, leading into the hunger strikes. So I'll come back and talk to your audience about all of that.
But, man, I would love that.
I was released, as you say, in September 1998 as part of the Good Friday Agreement. And I've been working as a Republican activist ever since then.
Now, I love your story. You've been active and involved for over 40 years at this point in time. But let's move and start talking about the center itself. Before we start talking about how the center becomes about, let's talk about James Connolly himself. Who is James Connolly? What is his relevance? What is his importance? And kind of shape him out for us a little bit.
Okay, well, James Connolly was born in Edinburgh of Irish descent. His family moved from County Monaghan to Edinburgh to a place called Little Ireland in the wake of the famine and the Great Hunger. And so he grew up with that sense of injustice that was done to Ireland within the household. But he joined the British Army at 14, and he came to Ireland. He was in Cork initially, and then he ended up in Beggars Bush in Dublin. He married a young woman from a Protestant background in Dublin, and they became, a family that was very focused on improving the rights and the needs of the working man. And Connolly's journey took him, right across Ireland. It took him from Dublin to Belfast. It took him to across Britain, to Scotland, to down into England. But in 1902, he did a tour. He did a speaking engagement in the US. He returned home to his family, and he decided that he would go back to the US, and that there was a lot of work that needed to be done in the US amongst the whole working population. The whole cause of labor in the US was, he saw that as part of his calling. And so he traveled in 1903. He traveled back to the US, and he lived there until 1910. And he traveled like from New York to Butte, Montana, and right down into some of the southern states. And one of the things about it is, here in the Aris, in the James Connolly Center, we have a large map, transatlantic map, where you can see some of the towns and cities that Connolly visited, particularly in the US. And it's very striking how he really spread himself right across from one end of the US to the other.
Now, how does the center come to be? Like, what kind of started the talk about the needs and those kinds of things?
Okay, well, the genesis of the actual center would be that with the release of some Republican prisoners and the start of this century, and also other engaged Republicans who would have seen the vision and the reach of James Connolly as something that could be inspirational to a whole new generation. It started off with a commemoration that was done at Connolly's house, which is just 150 yards up the road here. That's the house, that was the house that Connolly's family moved to in December of 1910, not long after they came back from the US. And his family lived there from 1910 until he was executed in May 1916, as part of the retribution, and because of the rising. And the house is still here. You can still see it. That there is a small plaque above the door, which was erected in 1966 for the 50th anniversary of the execution of Connolly. And for a number of years, a group of us would have met and marked the occasion of the execution of James Connolly there in May every year. But there were some amongst the group who had an idea that we wanted to do more than just commemorate the plaque of Connolly. And it has to be said that Jim McVeigh, a recently released Republican prisoner, and Harry Connolly, who at that stage was working with the Fáilte First here, which is the West Belfast tourism group here in the city, that they saw the opportunity that could be garnered from, bringing James Connolly back onto the Falls Road. And that's what this project has been about. So it started off initially with a statue, the idea of having a statue to Connolly. And in 2016, Good Friday 2016, we had the great Terry O'Sullivan over with a delegation of Irish American trade unionists. We brought them to Connolly's former home, and we walked them from the home to the unveiling of the statue, which he was participating in. But we pointed to this building, and we said that it was our intention to take this building and to turn it into the James Connolly Center. And whenever we announced at the unveiling of the statue that this was our intention, Terry also came on board at that stage and said, well, that he would ensure that his union and other unions would weigh in, and that they would help with whatever funding was required to make this project a reality. And he was as good as his word. 3 short years after it, as you know yourself, Jay, 120 trade unionists from across the USA participated in the march and rally up the Falls Road, along with hundreds of other trade unionists from right across this city, participated in that march and rally, and listened to the words of our Uachtaráin, Michael D. Higgins, as he opened the Áras Econia here on the Falls Road.
Now, some people will think of the center as simply a museum, and that's I'll say that that's partially correct. It's actually a lot more than just being a museum. Can you walk us through kind of what the center is, like how it offers, those things?
Well, we felt at the very start that it was very important that the Áras was not just a Republican commemoration to James Connolly. That Connolly's politics and his life was about much, much more than just going out on Easter week and participating in the Easter Rising, which a lot of people know about Connolly in 1916, but they don't know about the life that he led, organising, rallying, the labour organisations, the labour unions, right across Ireland, Britain, and as I've already mentioned, right across the US. So we felt that it was incumbent upon us to capture all of that within this centre. But apart from, just honouring the memory of Connolly, we also sought to create a space for, the community, where the community of Belfast could come in and learn about the politics of Connolly, because we felt that Connolly's politics are still as relevant today as what they were then. And one of the aspects of all of that was that we focused on the collection of books by Connolly, about Connolly, influenced by Connolly, and we managed to get one of the foremost independent book collectors in the country, a guy called Conor Kenny from County Galway, and he has managed to pull together a marvellous collection of the works of Connolly, and we now have that here in our Lower Lawney Conlia, the James Connolly Library. So we felt that was a very important resource, that young people trade union officials, students, and even school kids could feel that they could come in and study the life and the works and the influence of James Connolly.
Well, on the first, I am as a proud trade unionist, I love the fact that there is a center that is recognizing the organizing history and work of a person from my own industry. That's just a personal privilege, pride that I have about the matter. But I was very taken with just how welcoming the center is. When you come in, there's a coffee shop immediately there, which is just open to the public. It's not you have to go through the exhibit or whatever. It's just kind of there. The room that you're sitting in right now is the top floor, which is a great meeting space and whatnot. So I really, what you made a comment, but you kind of made it quickly, and I wanted to have you touch on it. It's not about what we would typically think of a nationalist on the Falls Road center. This is a center for every trade unionist, for for everyone coming from whatever track or background. This is about a man's very specific influence on the world, but he was much more than just a simple ideologue or whatnot.
Very much so. One of the things, which we understood the necessity to, really bring that to the fore right from the very start. And to do that, not only did we invite the General Secretary of the TUC, the Trade Union Congress here in Ireland, to that opening, to speak at the opening, but we also invited Francis O'Grady, who is head of the British TUC, because we understood that in this city of ours, to do anything that didn't represent people from that British trade union background, that it wasn't going to work. That for this project to really take legs, it would have to stretch itself over and above to outreach and engage with the community, right from unionist and nationalist to socialist, Republican, loyalist, all the rest of it. That is a job of work that we have to do. That now we are somewhat constrained because of this COVID crisis, but it's all part and parcel of the work that we do. One of the things that we have found is that people, with the new transport system here, the rapid transport, Belfast Rapid Transit,
sure.
And it's the glider, and it goes for the first time. They have a direct route from east to west across this city, and I know it might seem a wee bit,
no,
but it's something that didn't really exist until recent years. And we also had in line to have one from going directly from north to south, which it seems pretty basic, but the way these things work. But anyway, because it's that east-west reach, we do have people getting on the glider on the east of the city and coming straight across and visiting us here in the RSE Colony, and they tell us that until the glider happened, that they would never have found themselves in West Belfast, that in their heads it was a place apart, and somehow or another we have managed to sort of reach out to them. We have managed to pull them in and to invite them in across the doors. Now,
you also do a lot of really wonderful events. There was an event last night that was actually broadcast on Facebook and I believe on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, it wasn't it?
And so can you just talk briefly about the event last night, but more specifically just about how people can tune in to watch future events and those kinds of things?
Okay, well, the thing about the centre right from the very start, we understood that we would like to engage with some of the discussions and debates that would not generally be happening on the Falls Road. That if they were happening at all in Belfast, they would happen in the Belfast city centre. And we understood that discussions and debates had to be happening here if we were to have, if we were to be true to the politics of James Connolly. And so we have had people from a unionist tradition come in and do all sorts of lectures about aspects of their particular take on, you know, the constitutional position and the history of the northern states and what have you. But last night we had, in a virtual format, we had Lorcan Collins, who is a renowned tour guide, 1916 tour guide, an expert and author of books on Connolly and others. And Lorcan was able to talk about the Connolly the Revolutionary. And in fact, you know, he did exactly what we attempt to do with our exhibition. We trace the genesis of, you know, of Connolly's politics from, you know, leaving the British Army and working with trade unions right across Ireland and Britain and Scotland and into the US, and then bringing it back to Ireland, taking part in the lockout in 1913, organising the citizen army, and then seeing very clearly that the whole thing about sorry, there was a glitch on my computer there. I thought I'd lost it.
That's all right.
But that the whole thing about the 1916 rising and preparing for that, that if Ireland was to be the type of republic that he sought, that they would have to go out and fight for it. And then, you know, we talked about making the alliances with the volunteers, the Irish volunteers and the IRB and all of that, which led to the Easter 1916 and all of that. So it was a very, very interesting talk. But hopefully for anyone who was watching it, it gave a much broader perspective on Connolly than just James Connolly, the Irish rebel.
Now, where can people find that video? I actually had it on this morning as I was moving around and getting stuff ready.
Well, RSC Connolly, you know, if that can be put up on screen, AR, you know, the whole spelling of it, sure, to help people who aren't familiar with the Irish language, if that can be put up, RSC Connolly, they go to RSC Connolly on YouTube, and they will see a whole series of different events that we have held here. That, you know, right from the launch of the project to last night's event here in the centre. And I have to say that just this week we have released what we call our virtual CLAR. The CLAR is a program, the virtual program of events, which we will be rolling out between now and Christmas, because the COVID doesn't allow us to bring people into the RSC Connolly to learn about the politics of James Connolly. So what we are doing is bringing the politics of James Connolly through the screen virtually, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube. We are bringing the Connolly of politics to the world, and hopefully, you know, people can enjoy some of the other events that we will be rolling out over the next couple of weeks. We will have the talk of another famous rebel from a Scottish background who participated in 1916. She was a feminist and a member of the Citizen Army, a woman called Margaret Skinner, who, you know, one of the things that you see about some of the women of that whole period, that we tend to view them as typists and nurses, you know, that was their capacity. And
Sure.
Margaret Skinner was a sniper, you know, during Easter week, you know, so we will be doing a talk on Margaret Skinner. As part of our clár, we will have a talk by Professor Philip Orr and Joe Austin, our very own Joe Austin, who will be doing a talk about the poppy and the lily, the two preeminent symbols of commemoration and remembrance here in Ireland, and where they come from, and you know, and the similarities and everything else that you get there, the way that they resonate. So they will be doing a program. We have Paddy Murray, who's a civil rights, a local civil rights lawyer here, who will be doing a talk about a guy called Hans Litten, who before Hitler took power in Nazi Germany, this guy put Hitler in the dock and held him accountable for his fascist politics and what he was trying to do to the country. Of course, whenever Hitler got to power in Germany, Hans Litten found himself in Dachau, I think it was, and that he perished in the concentration camp. So, you know, there's all sorts of very interesting stuff that we are hoping to bring to the public, because the public can't come to us over the next few months.
I think that sounds awesome. I have told several people to visit the YouTube page, and you can find, you know, whatever your interest is. It isn't the focus of the center is not narrow. It is very, very broad. So whatever whatever you're interested in, you can find a really good deep dive discussion into that subject matter. It's a great resource, and I'm excited to tune in, and I'd love to hear what Joe has to say and those kinds of things. I think that sounds absolutely fantastic. I'm assuming that Kieran Quinn's cast on, you know, his subject matter expertise will be in there too. I'll look for that. Now, as we kind of close things out, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to join us. But what is your favorite artifact that's at the center? Like, what is something that you just, every time you think about it, you just think that's the coolest thing that we have here?
Well, you know, we have an original 1916 Easter Proclamation here, and there's a whole story behind that, which I've told you at times before.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, about the guy who owned that. Whenever I went to approach him about could we host it here in the RSE Connolly, he said, "Yeah, hold on a minute." And he reached down behind the television and pulled it out in a box, you know, and you're going, does he realize the worth of this? But my favorite piece has to be the ballot, the Robert Balla painting of the GPO in Easter 16, and one of the very interesting sort of stories about this Balla painting, which shows Connolly Land on a stretcher, wounded, and it shows you a British soldier, a British officer, who is crouching down, attending to Connolly. He was a captured British doctor, British Army doctor, who was brought into the GPO for the purposes of looking after the injured and the wounded. And this guy came in to view the exhibition, And he asked me, he says, do you know who that guy there is? And he pointed towards the British Army officer in the painting. And I said, well, I know that he's a British Army officer. I don't know his name, but I know that he was captured and this was his role. And he said, that was my Uncle George. I knew that guy as my Uncle George. And then he went on to tell this fabulous story about his Uncle George, about how he was stationed in India during the First World War. He was back here after being injured, and he was back in Dublin on recuperation. And he ended up getting caught up in the rising of that time and being pulled into the GPO. A fantastic story.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. Now, this is the one question I ask everybody because I'm an avid reader and I very much enjoy that stuff. If you met a total stranger on the street and they wanted to learn more, what is your recommendation? What is your book recommendation or movie or documentary or album or whatever? Like if people wanted to learn more about anything, what would you tell them to read?
Well, I would tell them to read, with a particular focus on Connolly, I would have to say that it's Labour and Irish history. I think, and in fact, I believe that Labour and Irish history was written while he was in the States, doing that whole, that part of his life. So you have Labour and Irish history, and, you know, that is such an important document. We recently published ourselves, it's an aspect of our work that I never mentioned. We actually do publish books here, you know, Connolly publications. And one of the books that we did just before COVID was the Reconquest of Ireland, which is a very important document, I believe, in how Connolly views the necessity to try and, you know, break away from the way that people view the world and to come at it from a different perspective once you break the connection with Britain, which some of us are still endeavouring to do, Jay, it has to be said.
It's coming sooner and sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us and for talking with us. I do want to encourage everyone when you are in Belfast next to set aside time and to go into the center. It's amazingly engaging. It's a very easy thing to get through, but you would be astonished at the great things that are being done there. Tune into the YouTube videos and find your pleasure there. But take time to really learn about the center itself. James Connolly was an amazing person and did a lot of good. And as a trade unionist, he is certainly a hero of mine. But I really encourage everybody to take time to pop in and tour and kind of see what's there. And I do want to thank you, sir, for your time today. I love seeing you every time I get the chance. So I appreciate you making time for us and to come in. And that's, we will look forward to catching up with you soon. Actually, there are many things that we need to talk to you about.
Cura Magat as an Curry, agus Cura Mila Magat as an Chancellor living up. Cura Magat.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for tuning in and watching. Please share this video, send it to friends and family, send it to the guy that you know that is a lover of everything Irish and is proud of their history and whatnot. Until next time, Slán.